Good morning, Pitt fans. Welcome to another edition of the PG Pitt Show brought to you by FanDuel. My name is Stephen Thompson. I cover Pitt athletics for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, coming to you on a Sunday morning from my own home. Wanted to, I guess, let what happened last night marinate a little bit because the way Pitt's 100-59 loss to Louisville unfolded, it felt pretty existential. It felt like something I wanted to kind of sit on for a moment and process a little bit more because this was dramatically different from the loss to Clemson or the loss to Miami, games in which Pitt was competitive, in which Pitt had a chance to win. It was even different from the Syracuse game where Pitt was down early, rallied to make it a game, but ultimately lost. This was more existential, I think, in nature. And I think that's how it left you feeling if you were a Pitt fan or someone who follows the team as closely as I do after the game. This was the look. I began my career in journalism as a student at Pitt way back in 2018. So Jeff Capel's first year. He signed his deal to become Pitt's next head coach when I was still a senior in high school. So I was working for our student newspaper. I've had 2 jobs after I've graduated. I've watched every second of all but a handful of games that Jeff Capel has coached at Pitt. And this was, in my mind, I cannot imagine a worse loss. I was there for the Citadel. I was there for St. Francis. The 2 losses this year to Quinnipiac and Hofstra, those are bad, but I think the margin and the timing combined to make this the worst loss of Jeff Capel's tenure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But to kick this one off, I think we could waste a lot of time talking about how this loss happened, right? Like, what did Pitt not do well schematically? What did they not execute? What did Louisville do well to create that 41-point margin? Doesn't really seem like all that helpful of an exercise to me, because regardless of how they did it, that's a 41-point loss, and there's no I don't know. I think after a 41-point loss, there's really not much worth dissecting actually on the court. And so I want to think a little bit bigger picture. So I mentioned this is the worst margin of defeat for Pitt under Jeff Capel in any game. It is the second worst conference loss that Pitt has ever taken, and it is the 7th worst, I believe the 7th worst overall margin of defeat in program history. One of the things that was most striking to me was how it was so very clearly over so quickly. Within the first 5 minutes of the game, within the first 4.5 minutes of the game, Louisville led 13-0. Pitt turned the ball over 3 times in 4 possessions. They gave up an offensive rebound when there were 3 blue shirts surrounding 1 Louisville player that led to points. They started 2 of 18 from the field. And over that span, despite 16 missed shots, they collected 2 offensive rebounds. That's just like mathematically like a near impossibility. You have to be playing really badly to not even collect some of those misses. You could sense that it was the fans, and there was a decent crowd, especially in the Oakland Zoo, something we hadn't really seen all year. There were Pitt fans in the stands there to see this game, and I'm sure it helped to have a Saturday night game. Creates a little bit of energy in that sense. You beat Georgia Tech really handily on Wednesday. That creates a little bit of energy too. This was a fan base that I think, despite the lack of faith that exists in Jeff Capel and the program overall, I sense that from the fan base. People have told me that directly. They want this team to win pretty badly. And there's still, parts of this fan base that is really excited about, or I wouldn't even say excited, that's not the word, but just desperate for a winner. And they could sense that there was a little bit of energy being built behind that crowd, and it was marred completely quickly. You fall behind by 13. If it stops at 13, you have a chance to battle back, but it only got worse from there. I don't think Pitt got closer than 30 after the 3-minute mark of the first half. This was just a comprehensive beatdown. and it left little room for Pitt to recover at all. They got punched in the mouth so quickly and so hard that it was impossible for this team, which I think is they have some resolve. They have showed that at times in game, but the season is clearly starting to wear on them physically, mentally. There just wasn't the will or the wherewithal to fight. Just wasn't there anymore. And that's not me saying that this team isn't trying hard. They certainly played hard throughout the entire way, but you heard Jeff Capel talk about not playing with poise, not playing with strength, not playing with force. A lot of stuff he's brought up in the past. Pitt just did not have, I think, the mental fortitude or the physical fortitude because of how thin they are to even dream of mounting a comeback once they got down by 13 and then 20, 30, and obviously 40. There was not even a prayer of making this even more competitive. They figured out some things on the defensive end, on the offensive end, but defensively, it just was not happening for them. And like I said, this is the worst loss of Jeff Capel's tenure. And I know, I said that, on social media, and folks have brought up, the fact that Pitt has lost to 9 mid-major opponents under Jeff Capel, and certainly those losses weren't good. I remember them very acutely. I think that Citadel season opener sticks out most in my mind just because it was similar and how comprehensive it was. But to me, I think the timing of this one, in addition to the fact that it was the largest margin of victory a Jeff Capel team at Pitt has ever suffered, the timing was really brutal, right? Those two things. I mean, Pitt didn't need to win this game to, I think, inspire a little bit more confidence in the direction of the program, but you needed to be more competitive than 41 points, and they weren't. You factor in that Michael Brown, superstar freshman from Louisville, wasn't playing. The doors open a little bit. Maybe not to win the game, but to at least be a lot more competitive, especially because it kind of played into your hands. He was an offensive engine for them. They are a completely different offensive team on a normal night, or they had been leading into this game without Brown in the lineup. So there was an opportunity there for Pitt to, maybe show some of the progress that Jeff Capel believed that they had been making over the past few weeks, and they didn't. They didn't, not in any sense, not offensively, not defensively, not in terms of, like I said, their mental fortitude. There was nothing there. And I struggle to think of a loss that felt more hopeless and more damning than this one. And part of that is because of where we are in Jeff Capel's tenure, right? We're in year 8. There was a moment, there's a period that feels like we're getting further and further away from it, but in reality, it's not that far off, where he looked like he had his program pointed in the right direction, right? Make the NCAA tournament in 2023. You post another 20-plus win season in 2024. Maybe you catch a bad break in terms of NCAA tournament selection, but still you are set up for a chance to improve on that and maybe build something more sustainable. And then you start off really well in 2024, you fall apart in 2025. So, again, in reality, we're really not that far removed from this being, a ranked, at a number 18 team in the country, starting 12-2. And then you get to where we are now, 8-10, bunch of losses to mid-majors, 1-4 in ACC play. You are just, and then you listen to Jeff Capel talk after the games about how repeatedly, scouting reports aren't being followed. They aren't able to translate things from practices to the games. They don't have the mental stamina, the competitive stamina, as Jeff Capel has called it, to sustain quality play throughout games. It's given that we are so, a loss to the Citadel, a blowout loss to Louisville or Duke, or I remember a Notre Dame game, I believe my freshman year, maybe my sophomore year, where they get blown out. There have been a lot of bad losses in Jeff Capel's tenure. A lot of them predated, or I think the fact that they came earlier in his tenure, they're a little bit easier to not explain away, or even excuse, but there were opportunities to recover. And as you sit here, there are fewer opportunities for Jeff Capel to kind of recover, and there are fewer avenues that are obvious for him to build this program back to even where he had it, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, half a year ago, 1 year ago. I think given how late we are in his tenure and how loud the calls are for his job, I think all of that combines with the nature of the loss, the margin of defeat, but then the timing, I think, also just plays into that as well. It is hard to imagine a moment in Jeff Capel's tenure that felt this hopeless and this directionless. The last thing I want to touch on is actually something from the other side of last night's loss. Something Pat Kelsey, Louisville head coach, said really stuck out to me. The Cardinals, without Brown, they had really struggled. Lost 4 of their last 7, 3 of their last 4 to some good teams, I would add. They had faced some adversity of their own. And Kelsey had talked all week with his players. He told us about playing desperate, right? And understanding the position that this team is in and what they need to do moving forward if they want to be the team that they want to be. He also talked about how in huddles that desperation was reflected. The players clearly took what they did in preparation, going way back to the fall, the principles and the philosophy that Pat Kelsey installed with this team, which does have a lot of transfers, has a lot of new faces. Those guys clearly internalized them to the point that in huddles, they were, in Kelsey's word, fixing stuff before it was broken, right? The players took ownership of the things that they were doing wrong, the cracks that they saw in their own play, and then fixed them in real time to the point where Pat Kelsey really didn't need to say much in some of the huddles that they had during timeouts. It's easy to kind of say after the fact, after a 41-point win, but I think that's notable when you think conversely about what I mentioned earlier about Jeff Capel and his message, which is repeatedly not getting to the players. It is not resonating with the guys as they try to translate things from practice into games. That's just a really stark contrast, right? In process, in team connectivity, in connectivity between coaches and players. That is one of the more damning things, I think, as well. When you see what it looks like on the other sideline, when you have a coach and when you have a coaching staff and a group of players who are on the same page, and Pitt is clearly not on the same page at its different levels. And that is how you go from, being a 7.5-point underdog when according to our friends at FanDuel, where you maybe have a chance at being more competitive in a game like this, to a 41-point loser. So, we had known for a while, and Jeff Capel had said it explicitly, that there were times where the message was not getting through and that what he is trying to teach and preach in practice was not making it to game day. But it is especially striking when you see a team that is able to avoid those issues and is, in fact, behaving in the opposite way, is functioning in the opposite way. You see it on the court. You see it manifest in a 41-point margin of victory for the team that is more connected versus the team that is not. And so that is another one of the reasons why I think this feels so hopeless, is because you see what it can be and you see what it is, and you see how far the distance is between those two things right now. And so I think that's, when you watch this, I think that is the more disappointing thing, is that as the season has gone on, this team has not gotten more connected. They haven't gotten more in tune with what they need to do, the position they're in, and more in tune with each other. And so I think that's part of why this feels so hopeless right now. That's all I've got for this video. Thank you all for tuning in with me. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to PG Pitt on YouTube, follow all my written work at post-gazette.com. I'll be with the team in Boston next week. Have plenty of coverage from their game against Boston College on Tuesday, and Abby Schnabel and I will be back tomorrow with another Pitt podcast episode. So we will see you all then. Thanks for joining. Bye.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.